Picture this. A twin-engine American fighter streaks across the Solomon Islands, its distinctive fork-tailed silhouette cutting through the tropical sky. Suddenly, enemy fighters swarm from above, their guns blazing. Within minutes, the P-38 Lightning is riddled with 104 bullet holes. 7 rounds slice clean through the spinning propeller blades. One engine sputters and smokes. For most pilots, this would be the end of the story. But for First Lieutenant Rex Barber of Oregon, this was just the beginning of one of the most remarkable survival flights in aviation history. April 18, 1943, Guadalcanal Airfield. 18 P-38. Lightning pilots received the mission briefing of their careers. American codebreakers had intercepted Japanese communications, revealing that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, would be flying to Bougainville Island for a morale tour. This was their chance to eliminate the mastermind behind America's darkest hour. The mission required surgical precision. Yamamoto would be traveling in a Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber escorted by 6 A6M-0 fighters, flying at treetop level to avoid radar detection. American intelligence had worked tirelessly to crack the Japanese naval code, JN-25, and this intercept represented months of painstaking cryptographic work. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was not just any military commander. He was the strategic genius who had conceived and planned the Pearl Harbor attack. His death would be a devastating blow to Japanese morale and potentially alter the course of the Pacific War. But the mission window was impossibly narrow. Yamamoto's itinerary showed he would depart Rabaul at 6 Gauss a.m., fly 315 miles southeast to Balale Island, then continue to Bougainville. The Americans calculated they could intercept him at precisely 9:35 a.m., 400 miles northwest of Guadalcanal. Miss the timing by even 5 minutes, and Yamamoto would slip away into the safety of Japanese-controlled airspace. The mission parameters were daunting. The P-38s would need to fly a complex dogleg course to avoid Japanese radar stations, maintaining radio silence for over 2 hours. They would have barely enough fuel for the intercept with minimal reserves for combat. If they encountered headwinds or navigation errors, they might not make it home. Major John Mitchell, the mission commander, had hand-selected 18 of the best P-38 pilots in the Solomon Islands. 4 aircraft would form the killer group tasked with attacking the bombers. The remaining 14 would provide top cover against the Zero escort. It was a plan that demanded split-second timing and flawless execution. Rex Barber climbed into his P-38J Lightning, nicknamed Miss Virginia, after his girlfriend back home. At 23 years old, this former college student from Culver, Oregon, had already proven himself in combat over the Solomon Islands. Born in a small farming town, Barber had dreamed of becoming a pilot since childhood, watching barnstormers perform at county fairs. Now he was about to fly the most important mission of his life. The P-38J Lightning was America's most advanced twin-engine fighter, a revolutionary design that had taken the aviation world by storm. With its distinctive twin-boom configuration and central nacelle housing the pilot and armament, the Lightning looked like nothing else in the sky. 2 Allison V-1710 liquid-cooled engines, each producing 1,125 horsepower, drove contra-rotating propellers that eliminated torque effects and provided exceptional stability. What made the P-38 truly deadly was its nose-mounted armament. Unlike single-engine fighters with wing-mounted guns that required convergence settings, the Lightning's 4 50-caliber machine guns and single 20mm cannon were clustered directly ahead of the pilot. This concentration of firepower created a devastating cone of destruction that could tear apart enemy aircraft with surgical precision. But it was the Lightning's range that made the Yamamoto mission possible. With external fuel tanks, the P-38 could fly over 1,000 miles on a combat mission, twice the range of most single-engine fighters. This extraordinary endurance, combined with the reliability of twin engines, made it the perfect aircraft for long-range intercepts over the vast Pacific Ocean. The 18 Lightnings took off at dawn, flying barely 50 feet above the ocean to avoid Japanese radar. For 2 grueling hours, they skimmed across the waves, navigating by dead reckoning toward their target. Radio silence was absolute. One navigation error could doom the entire mission. At exactly 9:35 a.m., lookouts spotted two Betty bombers approaching Bougainville with their Zero escort. Major John Mitchell's voice crackled over the radio. "Bogies, 11 o'clock high." The moment of truth had arrived. The American formation split into two groups. 14 P-38s climbed high to engage the Zero fighters. 4 Lightnings, including Barber's, dove toward the bombers below. This was the killer group, and their target was Japan's most valuable military asset. As Barber descended toward the first Betty bomber, he could see the enemy aircraft flying barely 200 feet above the jungle canopy. The Japanese pilot was already taking evasive action, turning hard left as tracers began streaking past his cockpit. The Betty was a formidable opponent, fast, well-armed, and flown by experienced naval aviators. Barber adjusted his approach angle, compensating for the bomber's evasive maneuvers. The P-38's nose-mounted guns gave him a significant advantage in deflection shooting. Unlike wing-mounted weapons that required complex convergence calculations, his armament fired straight ahead in a concentrated pattern. At 300 yards range, Barber squeezed the trigger. The Lightning shuddered as all 5 guns opened fire simultaneously. The 4 50-caliber machine guns fired at 850 rounds per minute each, while the 20mm cannon added its slower but more devastating punch. The combined firepower sent over 4,000 rounds per minute downrange, more destructive force than most medium bombers carried. His first burst struck the Betty's right engine nacelle with devastating effect. Aluminum fragments flew in all directions as high-explosive 20mm shells detonated against the engine cowling. The Wright R-1820 radial engine, already stressed from high-power settings, began trailing thick black smoke. Barber held his trigger down for a full 3-second burst, walking his fire along the bomber's fuselage. He could see his tracers stitching a deadly pattern across the enemy aircraft's aluminum skin. Pieces of the rudder and elevator broke away under the intense fire. The bomber shuddered and began losing altitude rapidly, but in his determination to ensure the bomber's destruction, Barber made a critical tactical error. He had reduced his airspeed to stay behind the turning bomber, forgetting the cardinal rule of fighter combat. Speed is life. The covering Zero fighters, diving from above like hunting hawks, now had a perfect opportunity to exact revenge. The first burst caught Miss Virginia completely by surprise. Cannon shells and machine gun bullets tore through the aircraft's aluminum skin like tissue paper. The cockpit canopy shattered. Fragments of metal filled the air. Warning lights flashed red across the instrument panel. Barber felt the Lightning shudder as more rounds found their mark. The left engine began making an ominous grinding noise. Oil pressure was dropping fast. He was still 400 miles from home, over enemy territory, with Japanese fighters closing in for the kill. In desperation, Barber pushed the throttles forward and dove for the deck. Miss Virginia responded sluggishly, her damaged control surfaces barely responding to his inputs. The pursuing Zeros followed, their guns blazing continuously. For what seemed like an eternity, the deadly chase continued just above the jungle treetops. Bullets streaked past Barber's cockpit with the sound of angry hornets. More rounds punched through the Lightning's fuselage. The aircraft was being systematically torn apart around him. Then, miraculously, the gunfire stopped. The Zero fighters, low on fuel and ammunition, had broken off their attack. Barber was alone over enemy waters, nursing a crippled aircraft home. The damage assessment was devastating. The left engine was running rough, oil pressure fluctuating wildly as damaged seals leaked precious lubricant. The cylinder head temperature gauge showed readings deep in the red zone. Multiple hydraulic lines had been severed, leaving sticky fluid coating the cockpit floor. The electrical system was failing intermittently, causing instruments to flicker and radios to cut in and out. Most alarming of all, fuel was streaming from punctured wing tanks, leaving a visible vapor trail behind the crippled Lightning. Barber could actually smell the high-octane aviation gasoline as it vaporized in the tropical heat. Each gallon lost reduced his already marginal chances of reaching home base. The structural damage was equally concerning. Several ribs in the left wing had been cracked by cannon shells, causing the entire wing panel to flex unnaturally during flight. The port engine nacelle showed dozens of entry holes where Japanese machine gun bullets had punched through the thin aluminum skin. It was a miracle that critical components like fuel lines and control cables remained intact. Barber faced an agonizing decision. The damaged left engine was running increasingly rough, its internal components grinding and scraping as bearings failed. Continuing to run it risked a catastrophic seizure that could tear the engine from its mounts, potentially causing the aircraft to break apart in flight. But shutting it down would leave him flying home on just one engine, a daunting prospect over 400 miles of open ocean. Training and instinct took over. Barber reached for the left engine shutdown checklist, methodically working through each step: mixture control to idle cutoff, propeller control to feather, fuel shutoff valve closed, magneto switches off, fire warning light out. The left propeller slowly wound down to a stop, its blades aligned with the airflow to reduce drag. Miss Virginia immediately began losing altitude on just one Allison V-1710. The P-38 had been designed with single-engine capability, but the engineers' calculations assumed a clean aircraft configuration. Barber was still carrying empty external fuel tanks, combat damage, and battle-scarred control surfaces that created additional drag. The physics were unforgiving. With only half its normal power available, the Lightning could barely maintain level flight at its current weight. Barber had to reduce drag immediately or face the prospect of a forced water landing in shark-infested Pacific waters. Fighting to maintain flying speed, Barber jettisoned his external fuel tanks and anything else he could spare. Every pound mattered now. The single remaining engine was running at maximum power, its cylinder head temperature climbing dangerously into the red zone. The next 3 hours became the ultimate test of pilot skill and mechanical reliability. Flying barely 100 feet above the Pacific Ocean, Barber nursed Miss Virginia homeward on the razor's edge between too little and too much power. Every instrument told a story of mechanical distress. Oil pressure fluctuated as the remaining engine worked harder. Coolant temperature crept upward. Fuel flow indicators showed precious gasoline being consumed at an alarming rate by the overworked power plant. Barber constantly adjusted throttle settings to extract maximum efficiency from his wounded aircraft. Too much power would cause the engine to overheat and seize. Too little would send the Lightning into the waves below. Navigation became critical with his radio equipment damaged. He was navigating purely by compass and elapsed time calculations, hoping his pre-flight planning had been accurate. In the vast Pacific, a single-degree error could mean missing Guadalcanal entirely and flying into empty ocean until his fuel ran out. As fuel levels dropped to critical levels, Barber spotted the welcome sight of Henderson Field's runway through the haze. Miss Virginia had barely enough fuel for one landing approach. There would be no second chances. The damaged Lightning touched down heavily, its wounded airframe groaning under the stress. As Barber taxied to the parking area, ground crews rushed to inspect the aircraft. What they found was almost unbelievable. Miss Virginia had absorbed 104 separate bullet holes. 52 rounds had passed completely through the fuselage, creating entry and exit wounds in the aluminum skin. 7 bullets had somehow passed through the spinning propeller blades without destroying them. It was a miracle the aircraft had remained airworthy. But the most remarkable discovery came from post-flight analysis. Barber's gunfire had struck Admiral Yamamoto's Betty bomber with devastating effect. The Japanese Admiral, America's most wanted enemy, had been killed in the crash. The man who planned Pearl Harbor was dead, eliminated in a precisely executed aerial ambush. The Yamamoto mission became one of the most significant fighter operations of World War II. The psychological impact on Japanese forces was immediate and profound. Their seemingly invincible naval commander had been hunted down and eliminated in a stunning display of tactical planning and pilot courage. The mission marked a turning point in Pacific aerial warfare, proving that American forces could strike with precision at targets deep within Japanese-controlled territory. The successful intercept required perfect coordination between intelligence agencies, mission planners, and frontline pilots, flying at the absolute limits of their aircraft's capabilities. For Rex Barber, the flight home on one engine represented the ultimate validation of his training and the rugged reliability of his P-38 Lightning. The most challenging part wasn't shooting down Yamamoto's bomber. It was the 3-hour survival flight that followed. Miss Virginia was completely rebuilt at Henderson Field, requiring replacement of both engines, major structural repairs, and installation of over 200 riveted patches. She returned to combat service within 3 weeks, a testament to field maintenance capabilities. Rex Barber continued flying combat missions throughout the war, eventually achieving ace status with 5 confirmed aerial victories. He survived multiple emergency landings, including 2 more single-engine flights home after combat damage. Today, the Yamamoto mission stands as a masterpiece of intelligence gathering, mission planning, and pilot execution. 18 P-38 pilots flew into enemy territory, eliminated Japan's most dangerous military leader, and returned safely. For Rex Barber and Miss Virginia, it proved that in skilled hands, the fork-tailed Lightning could absorb incredible punishment and still deliver its pilot home to fight another day.